Hey, and welcome back. This is going to be our third in a series of three. So this would be the last one in our conversation about the security fundamentals, looking at it from the CompTIA ITF point of view. Although, as I'm telling my students, this has a lot of carryover into both the A plus and Security Plus. This kind of builds a foundation. So it's still worth watching, whether or not you're studying for your ITF, A plus, or what have you. So welcome to the video. My name is Scott Ford. I'm a teacher here in Humble ISD at Itasca High School. I'm also a college adjunct. I've been doing computer training for many years. So before we hop in really fast, let me give you guys a quick thing. This is our Discord channel. You are more than welcome to join it. This is where we have different conversations regarding certifications, as well as sharing funny technology memes. So you're more than welcome to join us in your studies. And of course, let us know how you're doing. So with that being said, let's hop into our conversation about part three. And this is going to be a real fun one. In the first two, we kind of set up our introduction to security. We covered some basic ideas and some terminologies. This one, we're going to take a look at some of the more interesting things like attacks and social engineering and stuff like that. So, but before I get going, first of all, although they're not a sponsor of the program, they definitely power the program. That, of course, is Bones Coffee, and I am drinking the Army of Darkness. So I believe YouTube has let me put links for stores. So if you want to help support the channel, by all means, go get yourself some coffee. I've been a fan of theirs for many years. So if you drink coffee, check them out. If you don't drink coffee, why are you going into IT? All right, so let's take a look at our security fundamentals. And word of caution, we will crash at least once during this presentation. PowerPoint will crash at least once. So here is what we covered in the previous two videos. And here's what we're covering in this video. So we're going to list and describe methods of protecting data in transit. We're going to take a look at describing common malware types. We're going to list general steps to protect yourself and your organization from malware, list and describe common network attacks, and finally list and describe common social engineering attacks. So let's take a look first at protecting data in transit. So what we're doing here is we have data moving, we have data going out, and we've talked about encryption before. So what we're looking at here is actually protecting our data on the move, and there's several things that we can do. One of them is something called NAT, or Network Address Translation. Now, what's interesting about NAT is it originally started because of the limitations of IPv4. If you don't know what IPv4 is, I believe I have a live stream on networking where we talked about it briefly. If not, believe me, we'll be doing other live streams where we discuss IPv4 and IPv6 in much more detail. But what wound up happening is IPv4 works on something called an IP address. And when it was first created, there was no way, absolutely no way whatsoever that we would ever have a need for all the IP addresses that could possibly exist. Well, fast forward to where your washing machine might have an IP address. We ran out. And so they've come up with a lot of imaginative ways to solve the problem of limited IP addresses, and this is one of them. What NAT does is it creates a private IP address. The private IP address is never to be used on the internet. It doesn't go on the internet. These addresses can be used by an organization to assign to nodes on their network. So internally it works fine, but they're blocked when trying to get to the internet. So what winds up happening is your ISP, your internet service provider, will assign you an IP address. And that's it. That's what your ISP gives you. Well, you might want to give all the devices on your network a separate IP address. And so that is where the NAT comes in. This is where you can assign private IP addresses, so you don't actually have to use real IP addresses that you would find on the internet. And here are the private IP address ranges. And yes, you should know these. I would definitely say for A+, absolutely for Network Plus. And these are the address ranges that cannot go on the internet. So these are your private IP addresses. If you ever see one of these, it means it's a private IP address. So if you were to run something, for example, like ipconfig on your device, you're going to see, most likely, a number in these ranges. So NAT takes away the private IP address and gives the IP address of the organization. So what winds up happening here is as your computer is working on a private IP address, it can't go online with it. So somebody has to kind of shift it out and switch it out and say, hey, that doesn't work on the internet. Let me give you one that actually does work on the internet. And that is what NAT does. It will take the private IP address, swap it out with the actual IP address given to your organization by your ISP. Now, even though the original IP address was removed by your router or firewall that sends the packet, it remembers who created it. It remembers where that originally came from. And so when the response comes back, let's say you go to a website and you had your private IP address, your router swapped it out with the real IP address that your internet service provider provided you, it remembers who made the initial request. And so your request goes to a website. The website comes back with the results. Your router or firewall will go, hey, I remember who requested this. Swap out that IP address, give it back to your private IP address, and give it back to you. So that is what NAT does. One of the things, however, that's really cool is with IPv6, we shouldn't run out of IP addresses. Kind of what they said with IPv4. It's a lot more addresses. But even with a switch to IPv6, NAT is still good because it offers a security. It prevents people from knowing kind of how your network internally is laid out. And so while NAT might not be required from the point of view of having to create IP addresses in IPv6, it's still of value because it offers some security when you're going out into the internet, which is the Wild West. Okay. Now let's take a look at something called a VPN, or a virtual private network. I love VPNs. These are phenomenal. And I think we're going to see a lot more of these being used by folks, especially as kind of the internet's getting a little bit more and more kind of dangerous in some ways to be out there. So technology that allows users to create encrypted tunnels that secure their connections across a public network. It allows us to kind of wrap up our network traffic in an encrypted envelope. It protects our data by making it so if anybody intercepts it, they can't see what's actually going on. And this is commonly used by remote employees when they need to act like they're inside a company building but are elsewhere. Let me give you an example of this. So I went to Texas A&M to get my master's in ed tech. And while I was there, I had to do some online courses. So I wasn't always on campus, right? It was grad school. I live in Humble. It's about a 2-hour drive away. So I couldn't always make it to campus. A&M had us set up a VPN, a virtual private network, on our computers, which allowed us to connect directly to their network. So from their point of view, we were on campus. And so that allowed us to access the library, to access resources that we would not normally be able to access outside of their campus area network. So very helpful. And we also see this in remote work to some degree. It was very popular back in the day. You find VPNs kind of used for something else, which is more about security. Now you can have VPNs for your home computer, your routers, and your cell phones. I even have it on my phone. So I have a VPN on my phone. I have it always on. I have it running. It's just some extra security precaution that I like. I have it on my desktop. I have it on my home computers. I run a VPN pretty much everywhere I go. VPNs, you can contract with different companies. They're typically not expensive. And again, they really do help protect your data in transit. Now, I will say this. If you ever use a public wireless network, like at a restaurant, coffee shop, I would absolutely recommend you run a VPN. Okay. I recommend to my students to go study at Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks or Panera Bread. Love all of them. So I'll spend a few hours at Panera Bread. I'm connected to their network. I always make sure I have a VPN on. So that way, if anybody intercepts my information, I'm good. They can't make sense of it anyways. So absolutely use a VPN if you're ever connected to a public wireless network. You can use a VPN on your cell phone or other devices when on a public network as well. In fact, I highly recommend doing it. I wouldn't access a public network without a VPN running. So that kind of wraps up VPNs. And I'll also add this with VPNs. VPNs are also helpful because it allows you to get around certain firewalls. So for example, in countries that might be very draconian, very totalitarianism, and they block or they censor what their people can see, right? They block the news that their folks can see. VPNs, for some of them, are the only way around those firewalls, so they could actually see news that's happening around the world. Also, VPNs can be used to change your country of origin or your state. So for example, if you have some popular streaming services, I won't mention names, they adjust what's available for you based off of licensing agreements with the different movie producing companies and all this other stuff. So for example, let's say you're a fan of Doctor Who, and maybe that the United States doesn't carry it on your streaming service. You switch your VPN to somewhere out in England or somewhere in Australia, and all of a sudden you have access to this through the streaming service because the licensing is different. So that's one use for a VPN. I will also say, without judgment or with anything, I'm not saying good or bad in this, but I will also say if you do any torrenting, you absolutely want a VPN. A VPN can also anonymize your IP address by giving you the VPN's IP address. A lot of VPN companies also advertise they don't keep logbooks of IP addresses. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Moving on. Let's talk about malware. So malware is short for malicious software. It is a blanket term that we use to mean any kind of malicious code, any kind of bad code that's installed in a system to do bad things, right? Malware comes in many forms, which not only should everyone in security be aware of, but honestly, anyone who uses a digital device should be aware of. This isn't just geeky talk we're talking about. This is stuff that if you have a smartphone, if you have a desktop, if you have a laptop, if you are going to be online and use computers or any technology, you should know the basics about malware. Honestly, this really is not, in my opinion, an optional thing. You should know about these things to protect yourself and to protect your information, to protect your identity and all this other stuff. So let's take a look at the malware. First, we have our viruses. A virus is an executable program, meaning it must be launched. You have to launch this. A macro virus is malware that's planted into a macro that executes a series of steps when you launch it. Macro viruses particularly love Microsoft Office products or things like that, where you might have macros enabled. A macro is designed to kind of automate repetitive tasks. So for example, if you have a spreadsheet and you always have to add certain columns to the spreadsheet or certain information in every spreadsheet, you might make a macro to do it for you. And within that macro, you can also hide nasty little things, which is why macros are typically turned off or disabled by default on Microsoft Office products currently because they don't want them to launch. If you do run something with a macro, Microsoft Office will give you all sorts of warnings going, are you sure? Are you sure? Do you want to enable this? Make sure you trust what you're running. Then we have Trojans. Trojans are programs that look like one thing, but also secretly do something else. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't do what it's advertised to do. For example, there was one program way back in the day that was supposed to do weather. It was a weather program that would tell you the weather and what was coming up. Well, on the back end were all these nasty little things. This thing was absolutely malware. This thing was a Trojan. And you launch it, it does what you want it to do, but it's also got a secret payload that's raising havoc with your computer. Trojans are usually installed by the user, meaning to install it. So watch out for those. Then we have worms. Worms are self-replicating. The difference between a virus and a worm is the virus must live in a program. It must be executed. A worm is self-replicating and rampage from computer to computer. It will make copies of itself. It makes a lot of copies of itself, and it will burst out and try to infect the next system. Worms are typically where you find like a bajillion computers infected, right? Somebody gets a worm on a work network, right? You're at school, you're at a company, you got a worm, and all of a sudden that thing is self-replicating itself. It's spreading out. It's trying to do as much damage as it can. This is where we're talking about tons and tons and tons of infected devices and infected computers. So those are worms. Then we have spyware. Spyware is an interesting one because of who defines the spyware. And companies will sue, and they have sued, if a security company defines them as spyware. There have been lawsuits fought over this, but more or less spyware is installed in a system and collects information about the user without consent. Now, there is the devil's in the details in this one. Without consent. Now, I'm not going to name names of companies because they've got better lawyers than I do, but there are certain programs that are well known, that are well used, that collect data on their users. I am sure you use them as well. In fact, you're using one kind of right now to watch the video. They collect information on their users. I can actually go into the back end of the analytics and see age of people who are watching these videos, location, as far as countries, cities, length of watch time, all sorts of different analytics that I can see in the back end. The difference is that you have given Google and YouTube consent to do this. By using their product, you have given them consent. So they're not defined as spyware. Spyware will collect sometimes the same information on you, but it doesn't disclose that that's what they're doing. And so it all has to do with the acceptable user policy, the end user license agreement, and the fine print. So be sure to check those out. But spyware in general is stuff that's going to watch what you do, collect your information, but doesn't tell you it's doing it. Then we have something called keyloggers. Keyloggers capture what you're typing on a computer. It's logging what your keystrokes are. So if you're putting in a password, you put your username in, you put your password in, that information is being sent to whoever had that keylogger on your system. Now, keyloggers in general are illegal, right? But you can also buy keyloggers. They're used, for example, for parents who want to spy on their children's networking activity. I guess they don't know how to read a log file in a router. They can also be used for private investigators to find out if your significant other is cheating and what they're engaged in. So keyloggers in general are legal because they're capturing what you're putting in, your usernames, your password, to your bank account information, to your social medias, whatever. But also understand that in certain circumstances, they can be bought, or variations of those can be bought. Then we have ransomware. Ransomware encrypts a person or organization's data and then only gives it back to them, hopefully, if that person or organization pays the ransom. Ransomware has become absolutely horrible lately because they will come in and they will encrypt entire information. So for example, school records of all the students, medical records of all the patients. It'll come in and encrypt it, and they'll hold it for ransom. Hopefully they'll give it back if you pay them to unlock that material for you. So here are some general tips. Okay. Anti-mail, I got a misspelling there. Generally, to keep your computer safe, you should keep your software and your antivirus up to date. Keep in mind that even the best anti-malware software isn't 100% effective. You don't necessarily find every bad piece of software that comes in. In fact, a lot of experts are saying by the time your anti-malware software kicks in, it's already too late. And as the attacks get more and more sophisticated, it's kind of true. You got to make sure that you're practicing good habits ahead of time in order to prevent even kind of going down the wrong alley. So make sure your anti-malware software is up to date. Scan all incoming programs and data. Scan your computer frequently. Never click on links or open attachments in emails unless you confirm it was sent by the person you can trust. Even then, even if it's from somebody you trust, double check to see if they've sent you that attachment. I can teach, and I've got the links to it, places where you can create fake emails. And you can make an email coming from the President of the United States. I can send an email from somebody's parent. I can send an email from anybody. It's not hard to create a fake or spoofed an email. It's really not. Or worse, let's say it does come from the person that's supposed to send it to you, but their computer got infected and now it's sending out emails to everybody in the contact list. So if you get an attachment, double check with the person. Say, hey, did you send this to me or do I need to delete it? Okay. So the key here is to prevent malware attacks is to use common sense. Make sure your stuff is up to date. Make sure your operating system's up to date. Make sure your applications are up to date. Make sure your antivirus software is up to date. And don't click on links unless you know what they're going to or you're expecting them, because otherwise you can wind up in a very, very bad place. All right, let's talk about common attacks. So there are some common attacks that you need to be aware of. A system can be attacked at different levels of the OSI. If you don't know what the OSI is, go check out the Networking Fundamentals video, live streams. We talk about the OSI model. In the old days of networking attacks, they would typically aim towards the lower levels or the lower layers of the OSI. Now, the current trend is to go at the upper levels and applications. So the first type of attack is called a backdoor attack. This takes advantage of openings left in the system. There is a movie called War Games that's entire premise is around a backdoor attack. War Games is an old movie, Matthew Broderick. Would you like to play a game? And what he did was he found a backdoor into this mainframe that was controlling the entire nuclear arsenal of the United States and found a way in. So backdoor attacks are there. They are either left there unintentionally. In other words, the developer needed a quick way to access things, or intentionally, which was designed as malicious, right? It was designed to allow somebody to get somewhere that they shouldn't get, right? So maybe they put a backdoor into a program, worried that they're going to get fired, and so they can go in and attack things and do stuff like that. So backdoor attacks look for problems in a system which people can get in again through the back door. All right, buffer overflow attack. Even more data into the program than it was designed to handle. So the program usually has some poor coding, and if you flood it with too much information, it'll crash and it will open up a vulnerability. The best example I can give you of a buffer overflow attack was actually my oldest son, who, when he was still in diapers, I want to say, was at the Kate Center. This was back in Humble IC many, many years ago. And they had a username log on and a password. And in the username column, he started hitting a button until it went beep, 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 beep. And he had enter, got an error message, hit it again, and he totally bypassed the logon information and got full access to the computer. System failure. So not the best way to do that. So that was done by poor code. So a buffer overflow attack, you throw everything at the program, you crash it, or you open up a vulnerability, which can then be exploited. A cross-scripting attack, very common and potentially disastrous attack against web users. You go to a website, you request something, and you get hit with malicious code. This is one of the many reasons why it's important to make sure your computer is up to date. You can actually, if you are a particular bad guy, and for a while the Russians were notorious for this, you could buy packages where you could download it to your website, and when you log and somebody goes to your website, if they're not up to date, this package that you could install would go and attack their browser, right? And so if you weren't up to date, it could find a hole, it would attack your computer. But the best way to avoid that, again, was just simply making sure your stuff was up to date. Okay, a little coffee there. So let's talk about a denial of service, or a distributed denial of service. This is a DOS or a DDoS or a DDoS attack. And what happens here is you have too many requests at once. You overwhelm the system. One of the things I use to illustrate this is I have my students raise their hand to go to the bathroom. So if one student raises their hand, no problem. I can handle the request. But if all 30 raise their hand at once, that's too much to keep track of. And so by having too many requests at once, we overload the system. It can't respond to anything. And so now you have a problem, right? Now you have a crash or something like this. DDoS attacks depend on botnets. Botnets, I believe we'll talk about later on in this live stream. but more or less what it is, it's a combined attack of a whole bunch of systems attacking the same thing at once. And a DDoS attack or a DOS attack is designed to take down a network. Oh, there we go. I knew we were going to cover botnets in a second. So botnets and zombies. So botnet is a collection of computers that will work together to attack a system. Many times these systems have been victims of malware and they don't even know about it. So for example, your grandmother could be part of a botnet being run out of some other country to attack a system somewhere, right? So maybe come Super Bowl time, the bad guys approach the network and say, hey, look, it'd be a shame if your entire network went down. You pay us money and we could protect it. Well, what they don't know is that this two-person team or three-person team, in fact, have millions of computers ready to launch an attack because they've all been infected and they don't even know they've been infected or not. So botnets, these computers have been attacked. They don't know they're attacked. They are compromised. They're known as zombies or bots. And it's estimated, this is insane, but it's estimated that there are over 4 million zombie computers, with around 1/4 hiding away in the United States. This has gotten so bad, this is actually a national security issue. This is also one of the reasons why Microsoft has stopped playing, right? It used to be Microsoft would let you do an update if you chose to do an update. With Windows 10, Microsoft's like, you're updating your computer, you have no choice. You also have built-in anti-malware software. Because it's become so bad with the number of infected computers and devices out there that they have had to step in and stop it. So botnets and zombies. DNS poisoning. Bad guys inject the wrong IP address to the URL you want to visit. What a DNS is, and I think we talked about this in networking. If we didn't, we'll talk about it in another live stream. But what a DNS is it takes the IP address that you want, right? So let's say you want to go to Bones Coffee, okay? You can go and search Bones Coffee. That's not the IP address. That's not the phone number that your computer needs to dial. What winds up happening is your request, the name that you put in, goes to a DNS server. The DNS server goes, oh, I have that IP address. Here's the actual phone number, and finishes the call for you. DNS poisoning is we infect your computer or other device where Bones Coffee is no longer going to Bones Coffee, it's going to a gambling site. Or it might be going to something that looks like Bones Coffee, but it's not. For example, a bank site. Let's say you want to go to XYZ banking industry. This is where you have your checking account. The bad guys might have created a fake website for the banking information, DNS poisoned you, so now you're going to their version of the site, not the real version of the site. So everything you put in is now giving them access to your actual banking information. So DNS poisoning, it will remain in your cache until you clear it out. Then we have IP spoofing. IP spoofing is when the data packet pretends to have originated from a trusted network computer. By appearing to be from a trusted source, the network lets it in. It goes, no, I'm from here. Oh, we trust you. And then it lets it in and it goes, ha, 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 sucker, gotcha. Logic bomb. Logic bombs are usually scripts that will run if certain conditions are met. Two movies spring to mind. I want to say it was Superman 3 with Richard Pryor. And of course, Office Space, one of my favorite movies of all time, where there's code that executes. Right, there's code that executes. It will do things that it shouldn't be doing, and certain conditions have to be met. Well, one example might be, let's say that you're an IT administrator, you think you're going to be laid off, layoffs are coming, you put in a logic bomb that says search personnel files or search payroll. If my name does not show up in payroll, probably means I've been fired, right? Then do the following, execute the following commands. So a logic bomb are typically very hard to find because they don't necessarily match certain signatures for malware, which is also why you should always be checking your access. You should always be checking who has access to what and doing audits of your system on a regular basis. So logic bombs. Man in the middle attacks. The bad guys interject themselves between two trusted endpoints. The bad guys can collect data and or drop some malware. This attack is more frequently seen using HTTP and HTTPS connections. It also works very efficiently or effectively in wireless networks. So more or less what a man-in-the-middle attack is you have two things that are trusted, right? You have point A and point B. What a man-in-the-middle attack is, it puts themselves in the middle, and so communication is going through them back to two trusted sites, and they're collecting that information. They might be dropping malware on you or something like that. This is very dangerous in, for example, wireless networks, where you can create a fake wireless network. You can create a fake access point that might look like a real access point. You can dampen the real access point. So there are things you can do to kill an actual access point. You put your access point there, people are connecting to you, to where they need to go, and now you're getting all their information, all their details, and things like that. Then we have a replay attack. Replay attacks are why it's so important that your computer actually keeps time accurately. That's why it's important. That's why they do it. Portions of communication captured by the bad guy and then retransmitted at a later time. Probably the best example of a replay attack I can think of is if you've ever seen the movie Constantine with Keanu Reeves. Shia LaBeouf is his taxi driver, and Keanu goes into this bar, this hangout for people with magical powers. Shia LaBeouf tries to follow him. The bouncer at the door holds up a card for Keanu. He has to use ESP to figure out what it is. Shia LaBeouf comes right behind him, says the same thing. Well, it's a different card. So he gets turned away at the door. But him trying to give the same answer as Keanu ahead of him is an example of a replay attack, trying to repeat information to get access, to bypass certain securities. Wireless networks are especially vulnerable to this type of hack. So for this one, we use encryption and timestamps to lower the risk of a replay attack. We have software vulnerability attack. Basically, what ends up happening here is that no software, no program is perfect. There's always bugs, there's always flaws. And once the bad guys find out about this, they can go and attack it. What makes it even worse is that manufacturers, developers of software will often explain the fix they did. Hey, there was this problem, we fixed it. Hey, there was this security vulnerability, we fixed it. The bad guys are now going, oh, hey, they had a problem here. Let's exploit this problem. Now, yeah, a whole bunch of people updated, but what about the people that didn't update? The blaster worm many years ago is probably the best example of this. I was working at Best Buy at the time, and we had a whole bunch of computers brought in that needed repair. Well, they got infected by a blaster worm. If people had updated their computers 2 months earlier, they wouldn't have been infected. So it relied on software vulnerability of people not updating their stuff, which is also why it's so important to make sure your stuff is updated on a regular basis. Sniffing attacks. Attackers use protocol analyzers, also known as packet sniffers, or sniffers to capture network traffic. If the traffic is encrypted, and sent in clear text, they can read what is sent. Now, packet sniffing is actually important. We do this just as part of being a network admin. You're checking on the health of your network. You're capturing packets to see what's going on. The bad guys can also use the same tools. This is also notoriously used in wireless networks where it's sent from your computer to an access point. It's easy to capture that information, which is why encryption is so important, which is why I was talking about VPNs a little while ago. So with a sniffing attack, you're picking up all these packets, and AirSnort or Wireshark is also one that can do this, and we need to use these tools as an admin, okay? But they can also be used nefariously for the bad guys. So sniffing attack. We now also have zero-day attack. This is when a flaw or hole in software is first discovered. The bad guys create an attack to target that flaw, and there is no fix, or because it's brand new. We didn't even know this thing existed 5 seconds ago. Okay, so that kind of sums up our different types of attacks in general. Now we're going to hop into social engineering. And again, this is the fundamentals of security. In more advanced classes, you go into this in much more detail. Right now, we're just introducing the names and the concepts for you to kind of get them now. So when you do get exposed to them later, you kind of know what's going on. So that's much more in A+ and absolutely more in Sec+, Security+. All right, now let's talk about one of my favorite topics, which is social engineering or hacking people. Kevin Mitnick, for those of you who aren't aware, is probably one of the most famous hackers of all time. He passed away not long ago. And this is his quote: "Companies spend millions of dollars on firewalls, encryptions, and secure access devices, and it's money wasted." Waster. I could really gotta check my spelling here sometimes, don't I? Because none of these measures address the weakest link in security chain, the people who use it. More or less, what he's saying is that you could spend so much money and have so much equipment, but at the end of the day, your greatest vulnerability is people. That is always the big vulnerability when we're dealing with security. So social engineering actually requires very little technical knowledge. You are social engineering. This is preying on people. You are hacking people. You don't have to know much about computers to be effective social engineering. You just have to know people. And no matter how well you harden and secured your network, again, the weakest link in all of these security plans are people. And it's estimated that 80% or more of all security breaches contain at least a component of social engineering. So social engineering is huge. The act of manipulating people into performing actions or divulging confidential information. More or less, what this boils down to is you take advantage of people's good nature. You know, if people who you work with are a bunch of jerks and they're mean, you're good. Nobody's going to social engineer them. But if you have people that are reasonable and nice and polite and kind, man, you are so in trouble. All right, so let's talk about some of the more common types of social engineering attacks. First, we have something called dumpster diving. Dumpster diving is when the bad guys go through trash bags, cans, dumpsters to find information. There's a lot of information that you throw away that you may not be aware is kind of making your system vulnerable. How do we prevent this? Well, try using a cross-cut shredder. This will cut the information up and down, sideways, and also other ways. It cuts both horizontally and vertically. You can also use a shredding service and considering locking up the place where you store your trash. So dumpster diving is kind of one of the big things as far as social engineering. And think about it just for a second. You might not be throwing anything confidential away, but think about what's written down, reports. You might have in your reports the names of management. You might have names of people that somebody outside an organization wouldn't know that they can leverage to make it seem like they belong. Shoulder surfing. This is observing people to find passwords, pins, credit card information, and the like. More or less what you're doing is you're watching people put things in. You're watching people type things in or putting pins in or whatever. And it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody looking over your shoulder. People could use binoculars. They could use video cameras. They can use anything that they can to get eyes on what you're doing, both from near as well as afar. So this is called shoulder surfing. How do we prevent this? Well, don't work on anything sensitive in public places. Let me kind of pause for a second to explain this one. So I think I've made it clear in a couple of videos. I used to work for the FBI and I was a contractor for the CIA. I worked in North Virginia, and we have two big airports. One of the more interesting one was the Reagan Airport, where it was closest, I would say, to DC, where you had all sorts of, senators and congressmen and generals and everybody flying out of it. It was the big kind of, I work in DC thing. And it was always amazing to me as far as how much sensitive information was being used out there in public. I was on a plane once and somebody was working on something that was classified on their laptop on the plane where anybody can see it. There was a famous author who did suspense books and talked about different kind of, spy things. And he wrote in his book something that was pretty classified, and he actually got paid a visit by the FBI. And they came to him and said, "Hey, how do you know this information?" Well, in DC, you always love to talk about, or people love to talk about, well, I got this clearance. Well, I'm working on this. I'm working on this. And he said all he did was hang around this local bar where the generals and the admirals and all the upper muckety mucks of DC and the federal agencies just like to hang out and compare, who was more important. And he would just sit there and listen. He would just sit there in the restaurant and listen. And having worked in that area, it happens. So don't work on anything sensitive Don't have conversations about sensitive stuff in a public space. Keep your back to the wall. If you're working on something on a laptop or something, keep your back to the wall so nobody can see over your shoulder. You can use a filter over your screen that prevents people from seeing things sideways or from the side. And if you think somebody is watching you, close your laptop or put your phone down. If you think somebody is peeking, close what you're working on. Sometimes they get the hint. All right, little pause for some coffee here. All right, let's talk about tailgating. This is one of my favorite ones. You follow somebody into a place where you shouldn't be allowed to go. This is also known as piggybacking or infiltration. Ooh, that sounds a lot more serious than tailgating. I'm infiltrating. Very few people will slam doors or intentionally pull a door shut on another person. So we're preying on people's kindness, their courtesy. And this is used and exploited by the bad guys to get access to places they shouldn't have access to. It doesn't always require someone to hold the door open. People will, in general, open doors for folks in uniforms, like a delivery driver. So I actually did this. I was teaching FBI cyber guys, actually National Academy folks, up at Quantico. I was actually with the FBI Academy. I wasn't working for them yet, but I was doing contract work, teaching folks some stuff. And we talked about this, about tailgating, about social engineering. And somehow, for some reason, a bet was made that I could tailgate my way into the FBI Academy from one end of the academy all the way to the class that I was teaching. And I could do it for an entire week. And of course, they were like, no, you couldn't do it. So I'm like, all right, we'll see. So first of all, dress the part. Dress like you're supposed to be there. Well, the dress code of the FBI is suits. Suits, ties, you're dressing very nice. And so every morning I would come in dressed in a suit. I would also have, you guys can't see it, I have lanyards. Okay. Well, we have our IDs, and all the folks who worked at the academy have IDs at the end of lanyards. So suit, lanyard, check. Now, the other problem was I didn't have an ID. Well, I got a lanyard that leads to nothing. So what I wound up doing is I wound up getting a box that was empty. Nobody knew it was empty because I sold that it was heavy. And I would time my arrival to a door when somebody else was going to the door. And I would carry this box, heavy box, to the door, and somebody would always let me in. They would always hold the door open for me. So that's how I did that. 5 days, every morning I would walk in holding this heavy box. And I would walk from one end of the building to the other end of the building holding this box, which covered where the ID should be, because obviously I had an ID because that's where the lanyard went down to, right? Who would wear a lanyard without anything at the bottom of it, right? And I also act like I was supposed to be there. I didn't act like I wasn't supposed to be there. I didn't shy away from people. In fact, I engaged with people. As I'm walking from one end of the building to the other, I'm like, hey, good morning. How you doing? Great. A wonderful day, blah, 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 blah. By the time the fifth day came in, by the time Friday came in, people had recognized me. People were like, hey, good morning. They would recognize me and nod and wave at me. I'm not supposed to be there. But because they assumed I was supposed to be there, because I was friendly and outgoing, again, preying on people's niceness. I will add this. On the last day, I almost got busted. On the fifth day, on Friday, I almost got busted. I got cocky, and it almost caught me. Because on that fifth day, I went to Dunkin' Donuts. There's a Dunkin' Donuts just south of one of the Quantico gates. And I bought 24 donuts because I was about to win my bet. And at the end of the day, these were FBI folks. And I won't get them angry. So I was going to win the bet. They're going to have to owe me coffee. So I brought in 24 donuts, 2 boxes of donuts. And I'm walking from one end to the other. And I quickly figured out I might have made a fatal mistake. Because as I'm walking with these donuts to my class, all these people that I've been nice with all week, hey, good morning, wanted donuts. And they came closer to me than they had for the entire time I was doing this. And I was like, no, they're for my class. I'm teaching class. They're for the class. So I almost got caught. I got a little too cocky for my own britches. But I did make 5 days, social engineered my way, tailgated my way through the FBI Academy. And by the way, when I did get my clearance, I did admit to this, so they're fully aware of it. So it's not like I'm disclosing anything that they're going to go, hey, we got to go visit you. I've already had this conversation during my intake. Anyways, so how do you prevent it? How do you keep somebody like me from getting into a facility? Well, have multiple checkpoints to make sure people are where they're supposed to be. Use revolving doors and something called a man trap. A man trap only lets one person in at a time. And assume people are in your building who don't belong. Seal off your secured areas. One of the things that allowed me to continually tailgate and get from one place to another is they assume once you're in a facility, you're supposed to be there, because why wouldn't you? You shouldn't have been allowed in, right? One of the things that we do is once we see somebody in our facility, our building, we assume they're supposed to be there. Chevron, I did some contract work for Chevron. Chevron had the right idea where they had multiple checkpoints. Not only did I have to sign in, not only have to get by a security guy to the escalator, also to the floor I also had to badge into the individual floors. So they had multiple checkpoints to catch somebody like me who might not have supposed to have been there. In this case, I was supposed to be there because I was doing contract work. So if somebody's watching this from Chevron, don't worry, I was supposed to be there. Then we have hoaxes. Now, hoaxes might seem like harmless fun, while others can be cause for concern. The problem with hoaxes is that they can take up network resources as people send these things around. Hey, you got to pay attention to this. This is dangerous. Be aware of this. More harmful hoaxes will actually tell people to do something they shouldn't do. So, for example, I remember a famous one from back in the day where they would say, there's a virus going around. Your antivirus can't catch it. Do a search on your computer for like winsys.exe or something along those lines. And if you find it, you need to delete it immediately. Well, of course, everybody running Windows found the program because it was a Windows system file. You needed it. And so the hoax had people delete files they needed for their computers to run. So when they rebooted their computer, it wouldn't boot correctly. So no virus, but the hoax had people do things they shouldn't have done. All right, the next one. Whoa, what just happened here? Whoa, what is this? This doesn't look good. Uh-oh. Not President Obama? Mandate USA cybersecurity, FBI, Department of Defense, USA cybercrime. Oh boy, this sounds bad. This sounds really bad. Look at this thing. Attention, your browser has been blocked up for safety reasons listed below. All activities on this computer have been recorded. All your files are encrypted. You are accused of viewing, look at what I'm being accused of doing here. Viewing, storing, and or disseminating of banned pornography. Well, that's not good. It's even worse. What kind of pornography are we talking about? Child pornography, zoophilia, rape, etc. You have violated World Declaration of Non-Proliferation of Child Pornography. You are accused of all these bad, horrible things. But hey, wait a minute. If you're doing all these bad things, if I only pay $300, the federal government will forgive me? Wow. Really? This, ladies and gentlemen, is an example of scareware. Scareware is a particularly cruel type of social engineering. What scareware does is it's designed to scare you into action, right? So, for example, let's say I'm not a computer person and I saw that might scare me to go, oh my God, I didn't do any of this. President Obama is going to come knocking on my door. The FBI is going to come. I just violated world law. I better go get him $300 money pack from Walmart. Okay. So it does work. This stuff does work. Now, obviously that's kind of a more just bizarre one, but you get phone calls. You might get a phone call from the IRS. You might get a phone call from Windows service. If your computer's sending viruses. What they want to do is they want to scare you into acting in order to take advantage of you. And if you go to Walmart, next time you go to Walmart, go to the customer service area. The customer service areas at Walmart, this is how bad this has gotten, actually have displayed, and I think I see them on the cash registers now, about don't send people money. Don't send them gift certificates. If you don't know them, it's a scam. Believe me, the IRS is not going to forgive you if you send them an Amazon gift card. Okay. If you are engaged in that nasty behavior from the previous screen, the FBI is not going to turn around and say, okay, you just gave us $300. You're good. Okay. You're going to jail. So beware. Again, scareware is a nasty little type of thing. I would say it typically goes after the elderly, which is very nasty. IRS scams, Medicare scams, all this other nasty stuff. There's entire YouTube channels, by the way, of good guys fighting back at them, taking over their cameras and all sorts of stuff. So again, the scareware folks, there's a special place in hell for those people. Then we have spam and phishing. Spam is unsolicited email. Spam, by the way, comes from, not spam, well, I'll talk about that in a second, but spam, unsolicited email, might feel like a minor annoyance, but I can tell you from an IT point of view, you waste a lot of money and resources fighting against these unwanted emails. How do you help fight spam? By the way, the fun part about spam, or at least where the name came from, is it was a Monty Python skit where they would start stinging spam. You can find it on YouTube. It's kind of funny. So how do you fight spam? First of all, never post your email on a web page. Consider switching your email to text only. If you ever run a marketing campaign, you can actually see who's opened your emails. You can see how many of your emails marketing were deleted, how many were opened, how many were clicked on, things like that. Because in a normal email, there could be code hidden in there to see if it's actually a valid email address. So you can also see emails that get bounced and emails that are no longer valid. The bad guys send that stuff out. They can track, even if you don't take any action, if you open it, they can see that it was opened. Never respond to spam. Okay. Don't confirm that you're there. Watch out for those unsubscribe buttons. Sometimes those unsubscribe buttons are the payload. And also have a throwaway account. There's a lot of sites that say, oh, you got to register or whatever. Consider making an account just for junk stuff that you're not actually using. It's just where you can register for free stuff and you don't mind if it gets spammed into oblivion. Phishing, it's pronounced phishing like I'm doing like now. And trying to get people to click on something I told you it would crash at least once. There it is. Let me quickly pull that back up. And while I'm doing that, of course, a little coffee. All right, where are you? Where were we? We're talking about phishing. 222. And we are almost done. This is what gets me. We're almost done. We got one more slide after this, and then we're done. So we are so close to making it done without a crash. All right, here we go. Continuing on. So phishing. Let me actually put up the slide here. Trying to get people to click on something in digital communications, go someplace and disclose sensitive information. And there's different types of phishing depending on the type of target the attacker is going after. So you can have, and I'm not making any of these things up. Come on. These are some of the different types of phishings that you can do. And again, these are all legit. Okay. You have spear phishing. This is going after specific targets like people at a company. So for example, I work in Humble ISD. And so let's say that the bad guys wanted to go after employees in the district. They're trying to get certain people. So they're going to target their attack towards this organization. So they might have something with an email from the superintendent. Again, making emails from is easy to do. So they may send something from the superintendent. They may send something from the Humble ISD help desk. You're going after a very specific target. That is spear phishing. And what you're doing is you're trading the lower number of attempts with better results. You're more able to custom make your attacks. Then we have whale phishing. This is going after big targets like elected officials or celebrities, heads of companies, things like this. These are very high value targets, and then thus they're called whales, and attacks are very customized towards that target. Then we have vishing. Vishing is a combination of voice and phishing. Attackers try to mask their phone numbers and manipulate you. This has been a lot of fun lately, I'm sure, for everybody. Hello, I'm from Microsoft's technical support, whatever, or I'm from the IRS or from wherever. These are phishing attacks, again, voice and phishing combined. Then we have smishing. Smishing is using SMS, which is how text messages happen. I can tell you right now, it is March 26, 2025. And one of the smishing attacks that's going around to a lot of people is the toll road attack, or the toll road smishing attack, where they're trying to say, hey, you owe money on a toll road. I'm just going to do a quick survey. Students in my classroom, how many of you have gotten the toll road thing on your phone? Toll roads. You got it. You got it yesterday. You've gotten it. Oh, and UPS. I always love the UPS ones. It's like the Postal Service we can't find your home address to deliver this package. Please respond. You can't find my home address, but you found my phone number? You got Amazon one? So that is smishing. So it's using SMS texting to go after you. So that concludes our conversation of our security. Let me throw our Discord channel up again. You're more than welcome to join us. Again, I have my high school and college students as well as people from around the country who are part of this. You're more than welcome to join us and continue the conversation, ask questions. But that's pretty much it for me. This wraps up our third and final conversation about security fundamentals from the ITF Plus certification. Tomorrow, I have an intention to record another live stream, this one focusing on A Plus certification. If you have any questions or if you have a topic you would like me to explore more, or if you need help with a specific topic on your certification, by all means, feel free to leave that in the comments. I do look at the comments and I greatly appreciate you guys' support. And I think that's it for now. So thank you for watching. Have a great rest of your day and best luck studying out there.